Thank you. When early medieval cartographers set out to map the world, the story goes that they ran into some trouble. How do you map part of the world which has not been discovered yet? How do you show a navigation through waters which have not yet been navigated through? So they came up in a very human way with a simple solution. They drew magic beasts and said, "Here there be dragons." But interestingly, that's not the only mention of dragons in early maps. Here, at the base of this map, we see dragons holding up the world. And here in this Japanese map, we see them explaining why earthquakes happen, their bodies constricting the earth until it shakes. Dragons are weird, man. They're like some scaly beast which flies through the sky with the paws of a lion and the head of a snake. But the weirdest thing about dragons is that they come up in every civilization almost. Civilizations which are not connected with each other. Civilizations which are not just bound by vast oceans, but also time itself. Consider the Welsh dragon of the Britons, of the Aztecs, the rainbow serpent of Aboriginal Australia and the First Nations, and in Africa from Guinea, Ninki Nanka. And of course, we can't go past a bank here in Vietnam without seeing the cute but very guardian-like dragons. Here, this one coming from Hue. So why is it that civilizations which are not connected can come up with basically the same mythological fictional animal? Well, this was a question that plagued Carl Jung. He realized that not just dragons, but civilizations which are not connected come up with the same stories, the same archetypal characters, and the same motifs. It fascinated him, and he made it his life work to understand why. And he came up with a theory called the collective unconsciousness. Stories help us explain our lives. They help us explain our humanity. And even when we're disconnected by oceans, forests, or time itself, we all have a shared human experience. The same desires, the same fears. So despite living in different environments or different cultures, perhaps we manifest the same types of stories, the same type of metaphors, and the same icons. So if we take that idea, surely then we can retcon dragons and use them to explain what we know about our cultures and our identities. In his book, An Instinct for Dragons, David E. Jones says simply that dragons are a manifestation of our primordial fears. The claws of a lion hunting us down on the savannah. The snake, venomous snake, going through our caves, preying on our children. Or maybe just simply the awesome majesty of birds of prey above us. But if this was right, surely we would find some kind of historical evidence of dragons. Maybe dragons in cave paintings or ancient relics or idols. And the fact is, as of today, we haven't. The earliest evidence of dragons comes with the earliest evidence of civilization out of Mesopotamia. Now, as we were hunter-gatherer societies, when we developed into towns and villages and built our cities, the human experience fundamentally changed. We were set with new problems. We had a desire to take the natural order and bend it to our will, taking rivers which were previously flooders and irrigating them to help our fields feed us. And we lived with more and more livestock in populations which were more and more dense. This gave rise to pestilence, and as we know it, pandemics, at a higher and higher rate, meaning that death was closer to us. Isn't it curious then that the first earliest dragons are connected to these ideas? The dragon behind me, Ker, is a Sumerian dragon. A dragon of chaos. She kidnaps the goddess and takes her down to the underworld to live amongst the dead, a precursor to the Orpheus myth. Could it be that the Sumerians wanted to explain the one thing that we can't explain, our own deaths? In Babylon, Tiamat was actually paired with a freshwater formless spirit, but took the form herself as a saltwater dragon. Again, a dragon of chaos. She was killed to create the world. Now, there's some links here with the Babylonian world itself. Babylon was surrounded by two of the world's great rivers. They are master irrigators, taking an arid land and turning it into some of the greatest human inventions, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon, that we have seen. But at the end of those rivers, at the end of their empire, comes the great untamable ocean. How funny then that Tiamat comes in the form of a saltwater dragon, the very thing that they could not tame. As the towns and cities of early civilization came into developed, we started to be able to work out recorded history. And through the recorded history, it gives us an insight into how dragons evolved, and from that we can look at the culture of those communities. Here are the two cultures that influenced me. Firstly, I am English. I am from a land of knights who slay monsters and rescue damsels in distress. It is literally the story of my life. But I also have been in Asia for 8 years. I've married into a Taiwanese family, and I am acutely aware of the influence of the Sinosphere on me. So if we look at these two cultures, do the way that they interact with dragons give us an insight into their values. The Sinosphere is rooted in Confucian principles. The idea that the harmony of the collective is more important than the individual. That we should have a structured hierarchy and respect those who are elder than us and higher than us within it. That moral cultivation comes from virtuous behavior. But predating this, it was also influenced by ideas of Taoism and Buddhism. The idea that we should be aware of our surroundings, and to be harmonious with it, we should be one with our surroundings and our environment. Predating this, we have one of the earliest ideas of governance, the mandate of heaven. The idea that above us there is a celestial spirit or being who gives us the integrity to rule over other people. Interesting ideas. And isn't it fascinating then that the Eastern dragon, the Long, is a wise, benevolent force, often distant, often celestial, and linked to the heavens itself. It is an auspicious omen who comes and grants great fortune on the people it appears to, appearing through dreams, temples, and areas of great beauty. It's associated with water, a powerful yet calming influence. What about the West? Well, the West is obsessed with one idea, and that's the idea of the self. The greatest philosophical revolution coming out of the West is the idea of the Enlightenment, which gave rise to human rights. The fact that I have human dignity and that you can't take certain things away from me as a person, as a self. The West also gave rise to capitalism. And what is capitalism if it is not the idea that a single person with great sacrifice and great hardship can overcome the odds to gain great fortune, fame, and recognition? But this is not reflected in the Western dragon, the bestial, malevolent force, until we take a step back and we realize that the Western dragon is the antagonist in its story. The protagonist, the hero. The soldier who on broken knee looks up at the beast bearing down to him, his army scattered, hope lost, and picks up the only weapon in reach and readies himself to slay a beast of awesome power, of violent destruction, a beast which should be able to snap him up so easily it's not even funny. And does he win? Well, of course he does. It's a hero story. He overcomes great odds, great violence, at great personal sacrifice, and in doing so, he wins himself great fame, great fortune, a kingdom, or maybe a princess. Sounds a little bit like capitalism, perhaps. Can we go a step further? If dragons represent the hidden cultural values which dictate our behavior, do they also dictate the rules that quite literally and explicitly govern us? In China, A good ruler is distant and benevolent, wise and balanced, again with Confucian principles. A Chinese ruler is literally the son of heaven, descended from dragon spirits themselves. Chinese dynasties, despite having an odd invasion here and there, are typically more stable. In 5,000 years of recorded history, there's only been 13 dynasties. Perhaps this is reflected in the personal characteristics of Long, the wise, benevolent, celestial ruler, ruling in harmony for its people. In the West, however, power is more direct. Big castles at the center of conurbations. Kings also take their power from heaven, but they're reliant on the barons beneath them to provide them with armies. As early as the 13th century, the barons, through the Magna Carta, were demanding rights from their kings. If a couple of barons don't like what the king is doing, they can quite easily, with destructive and quick violence, overthrow the king. And when we look at medieval Europe history, what is that story except for a perpetual state of warring city-states punctuated by the odd crusade? Imagine being a peasant in medieval Europe and seeing the Fifth Army come through destroying your home. Is this representative of the arbitrary, chaotic nature of the dragon bearing down on you, effortlessly breathing fire and destroying everything you love? And as monarchies became democracies in the 20th century, with a slight hint of autocracy, the dragon myth started to change. One of the most famous dragons from the Western canon is Smaug, from The Hobbit, a great manifestation of cruelty, avarice, greed, and vengeance. But what is Smaug brought down by? The smallest of humanoid creatures, a hobbit, notices that in his great, impenetrable, scaly armor, there is a small chink, just one scale missing. And a smaller creature than that, a thrush, overhears Bilbo talking to himself and flies down to Lake Time to Bard the bowman and tells him about this chink in the armor. Smaug, unhappy with the citizens of Lake Town, decides to get his vengeance upon them, and he flies down with all the hubris and arrogance that belie his nature as a dragon. Bard the bowman takes from his mantelpiece a family relic, just one arrow, a black arrow, and climbs up the bell tower. He takes his shot, and fortune guides that arrow into the very millimeter of place it needs to be in order to strike a fatal blow. Smaug falls from the sky, destroying the village, his flames extinguishing in the waters of the lake. So what could it show us about how we look at power in the 20th and 21st century? Well, how many times do we see a politician mishandle a small scandal until it magnifies and grows and gets to a level where it can bring down the very greatest leaders itself? And as we move into the 21st century then, how can we use dragons to understand our relationship with power now? Here are 3 of the latest great dragon stories. The first thing you might notice, which will not be a surprise to you, is the corporatization of the dragon myth. These dragons now make us a lot of money. Well, not me personally, but they make someone a lot of money. The second thing to notice is that there is a merging of culture. How to Train Your Dragon shows a Western-facing boy reaching out and touching the Eastern Long. Could it reflect the multicultural and globalized nature of our world today? But if you look very closely, there's something a little stranger going on. Dragons were either creatures to be conquered or creatures who acted as guardians. But in these stories, they have become more intimate. Despite being great beasts of Game of Thrones, they are, or guardian forces of the other 2 movies, they seem to have become our pets. The human beings control these dragons and are able to impress their friends or destroy their enemies. What could this show about our relationship with power in the social media age. Perhaps through our phones we feel we have control of our lives. Or maybe there's something a little bit more insidious going on. Voices of the powerful have always tried to control us, whether it be through print media or television. But now they can come into our most intimate of places, into our bedrooms, around us 24/7, making us laugh, making us cry, making us feel anger, manipulating us into behaving against our best interests. Perhaps our relationship with dragons today, our need to train and control them, is a cry for help, an admission of the lack of our own agency and a reclamation of being able to get it back. So this brings us to the original question. How can cultures who are disconnected across time and place come up with vaguely the same type of character? And why is it still relevant today? Perhaps it is the fight for order over chaos. Perhaps it does show us about our culture and how it affects our behavior. Or perhaps it is an ongoing exploration of how power affects us. Or perhaps, simply, our ancestors needed a reason to explain some big bones they found in the ground. Thank you.